Hey everybody. In the previous post for downward dog, we spoke about hamstrings. And in the case that you're not having enough space in your hamstrings to stretch your legs in your downward dog, what you could do about it. And this video is about hamstrings. It's applicable to downward dogs, but also into any posture that requires a lot of hamstring length, and also in any forward folds, really. So we start with just one isometric exercise for now, and you're going to come onto your knees. I like to use blocks so that my hands are supported, but you can do the same thing standing, having your leg in an elevated surface or a chair. And so you're going to start with whichever leg you like, really. You're going to bring it forward, and then you're going to try and keep the knee a little bent and hinge from your pelvis. Now, already you might feel that this is quite challenging, so let's just for a moment bring the foot on the floor, come on up, and let the pelvis tuck and untuck as a warm-up and as a proprioceptive exercise, feeling our pelvis, understanding how far we can move towards one direction and the other direction. So it's very common when we stretch the leg, if the hamstrings are tight, to tuck our pelvis and to round our spine. Yeah, like this, we're able to have the leg straight, but we're not really using our hamstrings. And then when we go into situations that we go to stretch a little more, it doesn't feel so comfortable. So we want to be able to keep our lower back nice and long so that we're offloading really our spine when we do things that require hamstring length. And so it's not a bad thing to round the spine, and in many cases we need to do that. And in more complex positions, one downward facing dog is one of them, we want to combine how much can we get out of our hamstrings and how much can we get out of our spine in a lengthened position. We don't want our spine to doing the work of the hamstrings. And so we were in a kneeling position. You can bring your foot a little bit more forward, have your heel on the floor, and then send your hips back. Obviously, if your foot is dorsiflex, there's more pull into the posterior chain. And so if this is too much for you, you could always floint your foot. So you're going towards a half point just to release a little bit of that tension. But since we're keeping our knee bent, that might be okay. And so my sit bones are thinking of moving back and up in a sense. And then the pubic bone is also going back. Very few of us might feel that we have so much hamstring space that we could really take the pelvis the other way and let the lumbar go into extension. Yeah, it's not so common, but try here not to let your knee just lock so that we're not pulling behind the knee. This is a work for another time. So keep that subtle softness, subtle bend into your knee. And since we've been here already for a couple of minutes, we've been passively stretching, you're going to start to push your heel down and back as if you send the leg back through the floor. Of course, the floor is there and is preventing you from moving it further. And as we start to do that, we gradually increase the force that we're pushing into the floor. So we start by pushing around 20% of our effort, and we gradually increase to 40% of our effort. We continue to increase until we arrive 60. You try to keep your spine straight, the chest lifted, shoulders without shrugging away from the ears, the neck nice and long. We're not stressing anything else. You go to 80% of your effort, and you can choose to stay there, or you can go to your safest maximum effort, pushing your heel down and back. So as you're stretching your hamstrings, you're also feeling the contraction. And you hold that for 1, the sit bones are still lifting up, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now try to lift your leg off the floor without changing the position of your pelvis, without rounding your spine. You might feel your quads engage, but also your hip flexors. They are the ones that have to do the work. But because you're at the very end of your stretch, the end of your range, it's not really possible to move the leg. It can only lift up if you're rounding your spine and tucking your pelvis. Yeah, so I'm trying hard to lift it whilst I'm talking to you, but my leg is not going anywhere. And then you're going to release the action, and you're going to see if you can go a little further now that you've done this isometric contraction work. And going a little further, you're going to stay here in your stretch for another couple of minutes. And then you can repeat the same process, which is pushing your heel down and back as if you want to send your leg back through the floor, gradually increasing the intensity, 20, 40, 60, 80, your safest max effort, pushing down and back, 10 seconds, and then you try to do the opposite by lifting it up. If I was not in my end range, for example here, which is not the end range, and I don't really feel a stretch, I can lift my leg up without really moving my body. Or if I were in my end range and I tried to lift the leg and I did lift it, it would mean that my spine is rounding and my pelvis is tucking, which is not what we want. For the moment, we want complete isolation. So the pelvis is not moving, the spine is not moving, everything is stable, and we try to isometrically, without changing the length of the muscle, to contract our muscles. In this way, we can strengthen in the ranges of motion that we're not so strong really. And especially if we suffer from tendinopathy, the first thing we can do is those isometric exercises. Of course, if you're suffering with hamstring tendinopathy or yoga bad and you feel a lot of pulling at the back of the sit bone, sometimes you might feel it also at the back of the knee. You don't want to go to the stretch where you feel that it's aggravating. You stay in the zone where you're not feeling that pain and you start strengthening from there. So for example, if I were to come in the pose and here I'm feeling okay, but as I start to move more back and I lift my sit bones up, okay, I'm starting to feeling a little something. I go there, I don't push any further, and I start to work from here. If this is complicated, you could always do it standing, have your leg in an elevated position. I'm going to use the block, but you can use something sturdier and bend to the degree that I can feel the stretch, but without any pain, and I can start from there. And for the moment, we'll stay here for our hamstrings. Obviously, there's a ton of things that we can do, and I'll dedicate a separate video of different exercises you can do if you suffer from that inflammation in the proximal sit bone. Thank you.